Honorable Chairman, sir, and distinguished delegates, I wish you all a very good day. By way of introducing me, I inform you that I am Dr. Gautam Kumar Bera, a social cultural anthropologist, and I was the Tagore National Fellow of the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. I'll be speaking on the shifting paradigms of the tribal development in India. To begin with, honestly speaking, the theme of tribal development in India seems to be too broad an aspect, and it is very difficult to address the same with any delimitation of the jargon of academics or otherwise, since in India the tribal population have been under the process of transformation over a long historical period covering about 3 centuries. The theme exists in this country over the last 75 years of its independence, both as a theoretical discourse as well as a practice with administrative sanction from the Union Government of India. Hence, it is marked by the subject of boundaries and margins based on 3 paradigms: historical, demographic, and the last one being the indicator of national development, which has both contesting opinions and contesting claims. All these en masse have assumed a variety of forms, discrete or continuous, among other national parameters, quite often been discussed at different levels of national institutions, including the floor of the Indian Parliament. The observations can obviously contribute to general theories of social processes. This may not be seen in a literary sense, but instead be viewed that the social processes are associated with the nation's development in realistic forms. At the same time, one should also take into account that when the nascent nation was idealizing nation building, there was a concern for the tribal population too, who contributed much to India's freedom struggle, albeit in a different manner, that bears testimony to the heroism in this soil. A host of tribal movements across the country attest to their heroic struggle against the feudal lords like zamindars, moneylenders, and colonial rulers against social oppression and economic exploitation. However, since the colonial times, the tribals of India, as the indigenous population of the country, have been under the serious threat of transformation. Things started crystallizing at the nascent state of our nationhood, but even after the 7.5 decades of independence of nation, the issues remained almost in the same state of affairs. The first issue relates to the notion of tribe. What exactly a tribe means to all in India? The term got popularized during the colonial era as a social construct, more as a category of people than their real social and cultural existence. Traditionally, colonial ethnographers and anthropologists have quite frequently considered the tribals of India to be evolutionary preliminaries who are detached from the mainstream of the society and development of civilization. Keeping in tune with the Victorian evolutionary ideas, colonial administrator turned ethnographers saw the tribal population of India as a remnant of survival from what may be called the infancy of the society. They have also been referred to as a cluster of people living beyond the boundaries of the Varna order, and also been referred to as Pancham, meaning people beyond the margin of the fourfold Varna order. But in anthropological literature, we find that a tribe is characterized by the feature of being an isolated ethnic group with a common language, territory, social customs, economy, political organization, belief in supernaturalism, and so on. The colonial rule of 200 years brought both tribes and non-tribes under a common politico-administrative authority, with a few marginal exceptions here and there, subjecting everyone to the same legal framework, regulations, and administration. The economic order comprising land, labor, and the market system, with both credit and commodity, was brought under the common canopy. Hence, tribes become a part of the larger socio-economic Indian society, which threatened their control over land, forest, and other resources. The emergence of the middle class, elitism, and the class of nouveau riche brought them under the twin colonialism, the British at the superstructure and the non-tribal population as the base. Probably this was the first major step towards the process of tribal transformation as a never-ending process. Now let us look into the world from the pages of history. Indologists claim that possibly Kautilya's Arthashastra is the first monumental work which refers to tribals as a category of people who knew each and every part of the area they lived in and whose services could be sought for local tasks, including spying. In the epic Mahabharata, we also get the reference of Ekalabya, the vile archer. Historians also claim that Emperor Asoka was the first one to initiate the process of tribal development, might be under a different nomenclature, by creating the post of Anta Mahamatya, the minister to look after the downtrodden. With the passage of time, the term tribe became colonial baggage. In India, we have another term, scheduled tribe, by virtue of the 1950s framed Lokur Committee identification, which becomes scheduled on the basis of certain characteristics, such as primitive traits, distinctive culture, shyness of contact with the public at large, geographical isolation and backwardness, social and economic. With this, the constitutional benefit is bestowed to them with all provisions of inclusion and exclusion under Section 1 and 2 of the Article 342 of the Indian Constitution. These 5 parameters are the benchmarks of transformation of a tribe to become a scheduled tribe even today, after 75 years of our national independence, when our tribal brethren are occupying the highest echelons of the society, including the posts of the executive head of the nation, state, administration, military, academics, and so on. Hence, despite such processes of tribal transformation in India, our developed nation could not transform the characteristic features that bear primordiality of its own bureaucratic kind. Historically speaking, the term schedule first appeared in 1928 in the Simon Commission, followed by framing the term strictly for administrative purposes in 1935, when the Government of India Act was passed to provide legal recognition to the lists or schedules of castes and tribes that was marked out for special treatment by the state. But it was until 1950, after the acceptance of the Constitution of India, the first order of the acceptance of scheduled tribes in a comprehensive manner was floated at the House of the Parliament. Hence, in India, tribals comprise those groups of people who, by virtue of the declaration by the Honorable President of India, are notified as scheduled tribes. However, the contesting claim begins at the level of tribe vis-a-vis scheduled tribe dichotomy, both at the level of enlistment as well as enumeration. Show the population strength of 104 million with 8.61% by 705 scheduled tribes as per the 2001 census is debatable at any academic forum, particularly when the residentship of an individual supersedes citizenship of the same. The Indian Constitution became the Bible to draw the tribals from the relative isolation and social backwardness to formally integrate them into the larger network of Indian society. Such biblical injunction created provisions to head towards an inclusive society, providing an opportunity for the same rights and status equal to all in the form of citizenship right. Such a status entitles an individual to full membership in a community, conferring a host of rights and obligations on an individual. Probably this process of transformation was another step towards the world of hierarchy and inequality. The tribals, along with Dalits, were provided with certain special rights and privileges, which other citizens were not entitled to in the hierarchic society. It aimed at compensating certain social disabilities and age-old discriminations, either for historical reasons or otherwise, allowing their passage towards a common share in the participation of social institutions. This was the first major step towards implementation of affirmative action programs that tried to ameliorate the problems faced by disadvantaged groups. The additional affirmative programs aimed at improvement of economic and social conditions with the assumptions that firstly to integrate them into the mainstream society and secondly, if at all, to integrate them into the larger network of society. This was the follow-up phase of tribal transformation in India. The second issue relates to the notion of education versus illiteracy as a facet of development policy and empowerment of the population. In India, we do not have any demographic or statistical data on education, either at the macro or at the micro level. However, we have macro data on literacy, where 0 to 6 years of the population is excluded. It therefore presumes that currently our nation has only 73% literate population, all of whom are above 6 years of age. It leads us to the conclusion that 13.58% of the 0 to 6 populations of India are illiterate. While computing data on 0 to 6 populations of the scheduled tribe, we find 16.0601% of them are illiterate in India. Hence, demographically, we use the term most literate state or least literate state and not most educated or least educated. This shift of paradigm leads to the contesting claim, belittling the contesting opinion between literacy vis-a-vis education dichotomies, one of the most important arenas to understand development. Finally, the concept of development, like its kindred notion of growth and modernization, has its historical and intellectual roots in the period of major social changes, which can be put under the umbrella term Great Transformation, that is synonymous with social progress. While development resulted in many cases as a process of social change, transforming the traditional social structure, it could not result in change in a desired direction within a stipulated time. This field therefore remains an untidy collection of competing theoretical paradigms and policy objectives. Though the basic premise of the concept of development can be contested at varying levels, it is felt that the implications may be drawn from the point of view of the user. It may eradicate the problem of bringing together disciplines whose theoretical interests, methodologies, epistemologies, and scientific milieu are strikingly different. So there is no common consensus for for defining the term development, which however may be delineated as change in a desired direction within a stipulated time. The parameters of development are based on macro data like census or national sample survey, where anthropologists, sociologists, economists, demographers, and planners all differ among themselves with contesting claims that the data analyzed by each one of them is correct in regard to parameters like developed, developing, and underdeveloped. So a nation with one boundaries has several margins. Hence, despite having concepts like community development or tribal development, we land at the misnomer and finally succumb to development as perceived by administrators. This also shows the analytical possibilities of longitudinal studies like both decadal census and periodical sample surveys conducted by large-scale national institutions, which is something like particular strength of national ethnography. However, census embodies the principle of without omission and deletion, whereas a sample survey is a methodological tool of statistics conducted on a limited sample. The point that we are making here goes rather beyond the arguments expressed in the contested commons conversations over ages, ranging over arguments many of which are familiar ones, about the strengths and weaknesses of macro research based on survey data, sometimes using econometric techniques and favored by many economists, as opposed to micro research drawing on ethnography, favored, not exclusively so, by anthropologists. Looking at from a purely objective prism, therefore, there is an overwhelming responsibility, including loss of social mobility. This leads us to the certain epistemological issues that you like to address here. Therefore, the defense of macro data is a conjecture of much wider processes and relationships. Commenting on this idea, it can be said that the utility of such data can be questioned on the ground that they fail to take account of macro processes which affect economic and political relations within a given territory or community. However, to the extent that a nation is not regarded as a discrete entity or a self-content universe, but is viewed as an arena in which the players participate in or indeed even embody wider social processes. The analytical significance of macro data transcends the boundaries of the nation in general and the community in particular. Until the 1920s, the forerunners of the national freedom struggle also kept these indigenous populations away from manifesting their plight. Over the past 100 years and a little more, academic studies on tribes became the single most important preoccupation for decades to come. Almost for half a century or even more, several luminaries contributed substantially to the academic discipline of tribal studies to understand the tribal world from an insider's perspective, employing the methodological tool of participant observation. Their contributions virtually became the database for the administrators to understand tribal development at the micro level. Their debates became the bone of contention between conservatives and progressives, traditionalists and reformers, and their valuation became the mode of observation. I would like to argue here that through such studies, anthropologists acquired relevance for themselves and for their discipline with subspecialties by participating in a national project. Using more or less similar kinds of theoretical frameworks and methods of data collection, social cultural anthropologists studied tribes in different parts of the subcontinent and produced a picture that had many similarities in the way social life was organized in a typical Indian village. It reflected India in microcosm, and the social structure of tribal India established the socio-cultural identity of India as an undisputable empirical reality. The emergence of the new states, following decolonization during the post-war period, for India it was independence from 200 years of colonial rule. There had been an important influence on research priorities in the social sciences. The unifying nature of such studies underscored the unity of Indian civilization. It too constructed a picture on the basis of which the Indian state and its planners were able to work towards its development and modernization. It also developed further analytical possibilities of longitudinal studies in a dual capacity, like the ethnographic study on tribes and extension as this study. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your patient hearing.